DuPont Theater. Brought to you by DuPont, makers of better things for better living through chemistry.
Almost every American household has a DuPont product in it. DuPont invented the non-stick pans made out of Teflon. If you don't have a non-stick pan, you might have one of the following products made out of Teflon: dental floss, waterproof jackets, food containers, makeup, pizza boxes, and popcorn bags all have some form of Teflon in them. So what's the big deal? The chemicals that make up Teflon are extremely toxic. They're referred to as indestructible chemicals because they never break down. The DuPont family paid media companies, TV channels, and doctors all to hide the truth about this chemical and how toxic it really is. So while the American public cooked almost all of their food in this magical non-stick pan for convenience sake, their health was getting screwed, and DuPont knew this. If you happen to be conscious about the non-stick pans and knew the game, you still got screwed. Why? Because these indestructible chemicals were too expensive to dispose of properly. So DuPont, being money hungry, just dumped all of their chemical waste in water near their factories. The result was the chemical spreading from the lakes and rivers into the tap water, then to the farms, and ultimately into all of the food we consume today. According to C8 Science Panel, 99.7% of Americans now have the chemical compound Teflon is made of in their bloodstream, an indestructible chemical you can never get rid of. The health risk isn't too bad though. It's only linked to kidney cancer, thyroid disease, high cholesterol, ulcerative colitis, pregnancy-induced hypertension, and testicular cancer. You know, the usual. The DuPont family has a long and some would say evil history. The DuPonts are a dynasty of kings. The following pattern emerges in these kind of families due to inbreeding. Since they believe their bloodline is sacred, they don't want to dilute their bloodline. The DuPonts have always helped their children set up their marriages, more often than not with their own cousins. For instance, Sophie Madeline DuPont married her cousin Samuel Francis DuPont in 1833. Another interesting fact that comes to light is the DuPont's connection with Freemasonry. During the French Revolution, they donated huge sums of money to the Masons. It's also interesting to note that the DuPonts had a monopoly over the gunpowder industry in the 1800s, and many members of the DuPont family have been governors and senators throughout the 18 and 1900s. Now that we know a little bit about the DuPont family's history, let's get back to how they poisoned the world with their non-stick chemicals and got away with it. The DuPonts had a monopoly over gunpowder, which made them extremely wealthy during the wars, such as the Napoleonic Wars, the French Revolution, and World War I. But around the time of World War II, the US government recognized that the DuPonts had a monopoly over the industry and basically told them to stop. So the DuPonts, specializing in chemical compounds, created this thing called Teflon, which was initially used to coat army tanks during World War II. A little while after that, in 1954, a woman named Colette Gregoire had the idea to coat Teflon on pans for cooking.
Some people use a little oil or butter when they cook so that things don't stick to the pan. But I use Polytetrafluoroethylene.
DuPont loved the idea and started rolling out mass-scale manufacturing, but there was a problem. The US government hadn't yet recognized Teflon as a harmful ingredient, but DuPont knew the consequences. The company they hired to produce the chemicals was 3M, and 3M gave them a warning with every batch sold of how to dispose of it. The warning was, incinerate it or send it to chemical waste facilities. 3M warned DuPont that the chemical should never be disposed of in lakes, rivers, or sewages. So what did DuPont do? They dumped millions of pounds of Teflon waste into rivers and lakes across America. DuPont basically said, screw it, we're making $1 billion a year from this magical chemical, we'll face the consequences when the time comes. Of course, 3M warned them about the horrifying consequences, but it gets even worse. Researchers at DuPont secretly did tests without informing their higher-ups to understand exactly what effects the chemical compound has on living beings. What they found was that this chemical compound had horrifying and fatal effects on rats, dogs, and rabbits. The researchers informed their higher-ups of these findings with solid scientific evidence and test results. So the higher-ups just stopped production and stopped dumping it in the rivers and lakes, right? Nope. The profits were too high to do something like that. The researchers were allegedly fired, and the research they conducted was buried. Fast forward to the 90s. After nearly half a century of Teflon exposure, farmers in the same city as the DuPont factories started reporting that their animals were getting weird diseases they had never experienced before, and just started dropping dead. Some farmers even reported losing 75% of their cattle. Something was wrong. Here's the thing. These farmers went everywhere for help. They visited local doctors, local politicians, and they even visited the DuPont factory looking for some answers, but nada. Everyone kept their mouths shut and refused to help these farmers. It was almost like everyone in the town was being paid to bite their tongues. After 60 years of this chemical spreading throughout not only the US but throughout the world, more and more consumers of DuPont started hiring lawyers to take the DuPonts to court. Time after time, DuPont settled with no criminal consequence, paying pennies on the dollar for settlements. But the public was now aware of the toxicity of Teflon, and DuPont was forced into making a settlement that would restrict them from using the chemical for 10 years in the USA. DuPont stopped production, and the world was saved, is what the public thought. No, DuPont couldn't let their multi-billion-dollar business just vanish into thin air, so they strategized and came up with a solution. DuPont changed the chemical composition of Teflon into something called Gen X, something that wasn't banned by the US and could be called a completely different chemical compound. Since their brand name DuPont was damaged, they created a spin-off company called Chemours, and once again started distribution of the non-stick pans owned by most American households. In fact, owned by most households throughout the world. Chemours in 2017 merged with DuPont and created a company called DuPont. This is how the DuPont family fooled the entire world into using toxic chemicals to cook their food. So what can you do? If you have a non-stick pan, switch it out for a stainless steel, or even better, a cast iron pan, which actually infuses iron into your food when you cook it. If you like this video, you can support the channel by liking this video and subscribing. Until next time.